Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Oh, good evening, Maverick family. Let me get that off my face. Things are a little bit disjointed here this evening, and that's because the whole plan that we had heading into tonight's broadcast has gone off the rails. This was supposed to be sort of a premiere evening for a program called Strange Bedfellows. And just to add more confusion, my phone rings. We'll just turn that off for now. Anyway, 4 minutes before airtime, I finally saw a message come in, which had been sent previous. The whole thing has been canceled. So I'm flying solo, and I have no preparation whatsoever for tonight's program. So it's going to be an adventure. It's okay, though. I'm sure we'll find things to talk about, like Pierre Poilievre holding the federal government, liberal federal government's feet to the fire tonight on the Paul Bernardo's serial killer transfer from maximum security to medium security. Yeah, that was a hot topic in the House of Commons today during question period, so we'll certainly touch on that. And I know that our American friends may not be entirely familiar with the Paul Bernardo serial killing case, but it did make international headlines when the court case wound its way through the legal system 30 years ago? Anyway, he's still in jail, but now transferred to a medium security facility. What else are we going to talk about tonight? Probably touch a little bit on what is going on with Trump and his indictment. And what else was there? Well, other stuff. Oh, 4 people charged with stealing and selling human body parts from the Harvard Medical School morgue. Oh. I don't know, man. Every day I sit here and I think it can't get any worse. And then it does. Just when it seems to be getting better. More weird, creepy, dark, terrible stuff. Anyway, we'll try and find a little bit of joy in what we're doing here tonight as well. And you guys can weigh in on the conversation here too and tell me what you think of what we did last night with the call-in show. Instead of doing the phone thing, we had people link in and join by video cam. So tell me if you liked that or not. I had a few people send messages in, some pro, some con, some liked it, some didn't. So we'll see what you guys think of that, and then I'll adjust the program accordingly moving forward. So don't go away. There's all kinds of news coming up. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but fasten your seatbelts. I'm going to do my best to make it worth your time.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So first up, let's go to the House of Commons in Canada. We'll start in Canada, then we'll make our way across the border into the United States. But first up, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, going back to the Paul Bernardo serial killer issue and his transfer from maximum security to medium security. Here he is in the House.
Oral questions, question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Toute une génération de femmes.
An entire generation of women will have to relive the trauma of Paul Bernardo with the news that this government moved Paul Bernardo, that monster, from a maximum security facility to a medium security facility. He will be able to have visitors. He'll be able to interact with other people. The Minister of Public Safety said that he was shocked by the news. We now know that he'd been aware for 3 months. So what he said was false. Will he resign? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was shocked. I was shocked because I was informed about this on May 30th, the day after Mr. Bernardo was transferred to a medium security institution. It was a mistake within my office. I will take tangible action now. We will always defend victims' rights. I will communicate with representatives of the families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey. We will always stand up for their rights and all victims' rights. The Honourable Opposition Leader.
Of Canadian women have to relive the traumatization of hearing Paul Bernardo's name. They all remember his horrific and monstrous crimes. That they learned that this government decided to free this monster from maximum security prison and allow him to go to medium security, where he'd be able to interact with other people, have visitors, and enjoy other liberties. Now, this minister claimed this was all a big surprise to him. However, we learned today that his office knew in early March and was informed again in May. In other words, he did know, and what he said was false. Will he resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, nothing could be further from the truth. As I said earlier, I was informed on May 30th, the day after Paul Bernardo was physically transferred to a medium security institution. And at that time, I took immediate action expressing the concerns of the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French to the Commissioner. There is an internal review process. I have also made it clear to my staff that this should have been briefed immediately. Corrective steps have been taken. I have dealt with it, and we will now always defend the rights of victims.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, now he's throwing his staff under the bus. His office admits that they found out on March the 2nd, 3 months before the minister claimed to be shocked by the news. If his staff had really kept a secret from him of this enormity, he would have fired them a long time ago. But he hasn't, because he knows and they know that he knew way back then. So will he do the only honorable thing that is left for him to do and resign?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I invite the leader of the Conservative Party to repeat that allegation outside of the House. I will absolutely reject it. I knew on May 30th.
Order. 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 I'm going to ask the members to take a deep breath. I know some of the topics we discuss in here are very emotional and we get carried away, but I'm going to ask everyone to take a deep breath and allow the minister to answer so that the honourable member of the leader of the opposition can hear the answer. The honourable minister, please continue. You have 22 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, it is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada who misleads this House when he impugns my knowledge before May 30th. I had made it absolutely clear that that was the day on which I found out. I have taken corrective steps internally with my office, an office for which I am responsible for, to this Parliament, to the Canadian public, which is why immediately upon knowing that fact that he was transferred to a medium security institution, I raised it with the Commissioner. I've spoken with the representatives of the families of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, and we will always defend.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, first of all, I have stated all of these things outside of the House of Commons, so whatever threat he's trying to make, he can act on. But more important than that, he did not act. His office knew on March the 2nd. He expects us to believe that his staff just forgot to walk down the hall and inform him that perhaps the most notorious killer in Canadian history was being moved out of a maximum security penitentiary to enjoy more luxuries and more freedoms in a medium security penitentiary. Finally, he has the power now to designate mass murderers all to go into maximum security prisons. He could have done that weeks ago. Why hasn't he done it? And why hasn't he resigned?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada lays out a prescription for political interference, which foreshadows what Canadians would get with a Conservative government. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we recognize the independence of those decisions. And when I became aware of the fact that Bernardo had been transferred to a medium security institution, I raised it with the Commissioner. I raised the concern.
I'm going to have to interrupt again. I mean, it's getting way out of hand. I just want everyone to take a deep breath. The Honourable Minister, you have 20 seconds.
Say you're sorry. Mr. Speaker, in the questions that are posed by the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Canadians know they will get a prescription for political interference. On this side of the House, we're doing it the right way. Today, I will be issuing new ministerial instructions to the Correctional Services of Canada to make sure that they put victims' rights at the center of decisions to transfer, that they inform victims' families before those transfers take place, and we will always stand up for their rights.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is the legitimate power of a public safety minister to issue directives about classes of prisoners. The former public safety minister, Ralph Goodale, did that about prisoners suspected of having contraband. That's right. That is normal. That is a power that the minister has today. He could classify all mass murderers as requiring maximum security detention. That is a decision he could make now. It is a decision he could have made on March the 2nd when his office became aware that this monster was being transferred out of maximum security prison. Why, given that he has not done that and because he has misled this House, will the Prime Minister fire him?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada did not hear my last answer. We will be issuing new directions to the Correctional Service of Canada to ensure that they put victims' rights at the center of these decisions, to be sure that they inform victims' families before these transfers take place, and to be sure that I am directly notified on a go forward. What did they get with Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, the last time they were in government? Cuts to the Correctional Services of Canada in the amount of $300 million in their last year of government. That's the difference between what Canadians get with Conservatives and what they will get with our government.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, the government must launch an inquiry into Chinese interference and before the end of the session. The government seems more open, but we're not making any headway in reality because the government is refusing to be clear about their intentions. It's because of an interesting word, one that starts with P. When we talk about inquiry, the government talks about public process, but no matter how hard I try to figure it out, I can't figure out what a public process is. And I'm afraid the candidates for the inquiry don't know what it means either. But you know what is clear and even defined by a law? A public commission of inquiry. That would be clear. So why not just announce a public independent commission of inquiry? Everyone wants it. That's where we're at, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for his question. I share with all parliamentarians the desire to decide on the right process. Now, Mr. Speaker, a public inquiry has always been an option on the table, but we need to find the right way to do this work. We need to do so in a way that protects highly confidential, secret information. And we also want to restore Canadians' trust. That's what we want to do, and we hope to do so with the support of the opposition. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Public process again. Mr. Speaker, it's not easy to get facts out of them. When we talk about an inquiry into interference, it's like the government is playing a game of not yes, not no, but it has to say yes. They need to say yes because it's just too important. The government has a duty to launch this inquiry before the end of the session. In order to do so, the government must first announce the format of the inquiry, which should be a commission, and two, ensure that the commissioner is truly independent. No one will accept the position of commissioner if the government keeps its intentions secret. So, public and independent commission of inquiry. One question, yes or no? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I said yesterday that we appreciated the Bloc Québécois letter. It was an important step in reaching consensus among parties with regard to the best way to move forward. Now the colleague says he wants a public independent commission of inquiry. Maybe he didn't hear me. I said that that is an option on the table for the government. That said, Mr. Speaker, we do need to define the terms of the public inquiry. We need to define and determine the process the right way. We need to determine how we're going to protect confidential information, what the timelines will be, and who the right person should be to lead this inquiry. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Office of the Public Security Minister. We just have found out that his office was aware of the transfer of Paul Bernardo out of maximum security 3 months ago, but the minister claims that he only knew about it on May 30th. If the minister can't keep his house in order, how is he going to keep the country safe? When will the minister stop waiting beside a fax machine and start checking his emails for these serious updates?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Sir, I want to thank my colleague from the NDP for his question. As I said earlier in this chamber, that I was notified on May 30th, the day after Paul Bernardo was transferred to a medium security institution. I have taken corrective steps to deal with the issues within my office, and going forward have indicated that we will be issuing new instructions to the Correctional Service of Canada to put victims' rights at the very center of transfer decisions, to make sure that victims' families are notified, and that is something that I will continue to be focused on every day. That is defending victims' rights.
Well, member for Burnaby South.
The problem doesn't end there. Le directeur du
The director of CSIS confirmed in committee that his department had indeed informed the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, when he was Minister for Public Safety, of the information concerning the member for Wellington Halton Hills. I quote the director. He said, "I shared the information with the Department of Public Safety with very specific instructions to share it with the Minister." So, can the Minister confirm to this House that he is now able to check his emails?
Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Speaker, I'm pleased to have an opportunity to clear up a misunderstanding the member opposite appears to have. Mr. Speaker, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, the public safety officials, and Director Vigneault have all been very clear. Ministers and their offices do not have direct access to top secret electronic networks. Mr. Vigneault did not send his note to me, nor did he notify me that the information had been sent. Director Vigneault had many opportunities to brief me, and unfortunately never briefed me on the contents of his note.
L'honorable député de...
Okay, enough of this. It just, the the circus continues. And I don't know, the whole Bernardo thing, it is disgusting. I know that it doesn't sit well with Canadians, but that has been the case with the justice system and the Canadian public for as long as I can remember. The way the government treats criminals, especially killers, child molesters, violent criminals, the Canadian justice system has always been soft. It's just the way it is because Canadians keep on electing progressive politicians. And they don't look to punish. They look to rehabilitate. And they look to counsel. And that's just the way it's been for a very long time. Really, I think since the 60s and the election of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Justice reform. So Pierre Poilievre running on that platform. Well, that plank, he's putting that plank in his platform, getting tougher on criminals. We'll see what happens. Don't go away. I've got a lot more stuff right after this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So just to sort of tie up a loose end with regard to the Bernardo story, this is a statement from the Minister of Public Safety, Marco Mendicino. Tonight, he says, as Minister of Public Safety, a former federal prosecutor, and as a Canadian, I share the anger and disappointment felt across the country following the Correctional Service of Canada's independent decision to transfer Paul Bernardo to a medium security institution. Our thoughts are with the families and friends of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey, the victims, and the re-traumatization they have faced over the previous weeks. This morning, I had the chance to speak with their Representative Timothy Danson. I offered him my assurances that they will receive the support they deserve. Going forward, I will be issuing a ministerial directive to the Correctional Service of Canada that requires the following. 1, CSC must re-examine its policies to ensure that victims' rights are guiding the decision-making process. 2, CSC should inform victims of any transfer of inmates between maximum and medium security institutions and not just to minimum security, as is currently the case. 3, the Minister of Public Safety must be formally and directly notified by CSC in advance of the transfer of any high-profile or dangerous offenders. The public interest demands that more information be shared in high-profile offender cases. The Privacy Act and other legislation currently puts significant limits on what can be discussed publicly, including information surrounding specific inmate transfers. I am asking the Privacy Commissioner to ensure that Canadians can be aware of relevant information by proposing new procedures about sharing information with the public, victims, and their families in high-profile cases. These changes will ensure that victims' rights are at the center of the correctional system and that the government can communicate appropriately with CSC and Canadians. It isn't just the flow of the information, though. It's the decision to move Bernardo, probably Canada's highest profile, most notorious serial killer, to a medium security facility, period. What's being done about that? Will he be taken back to maximum? Not hearing that. That is what Canadians are most outraged about. It isn't just being informed of it, Mr. Mendicino. It's the fact that it's happening. And flow of information is at the center of another story that emerged this week. This coming out of the GOP Oversight Committee, looking at the handling of the pandemic in the United States. And this week, the director of the CDC, Rochelle Walensky, appeared to testify. It's something I wanted to touch on. I thought the testimony was revealing, informative, and gave us a good indication of where the mindset is at within the government right now. And it also gave us a glimpse into the emergence of truth in the face of the government efforts to just simply promote its narrative during the pandemic. So the most fiery exchange to take place, I think, took place between Walensky and Jim Jordan at the time. It really came down to this: the directives that came from the government, the CDC, and the World Health Organization, frankly, which was pretty much in lockstep. The CDC was in lockstep with what the World Health Organization was dictating at the time. And then we now know that there were contradictory statements made, and it was confusing the public. And it throws into question the validity of what the CDC was doing at the time. A lot of what happened, as everyone here, I'm sure, is aware, public trust in these government institutions like the CDC was eroded and I think irreparably damaged. And Walensky was at the helm at the time. It was Walensky who was guiding public health policy from the CDC all through the pandemic. Now, it's interesting that, she announced last month that she will be resigning from the CDC, and her resignation takes effect June 30th, the end of this month. And the GOP Oversight Committee had one heck of a time even getting her to testify. And it looked like, from all indications were, that it was the government, the Biden administration, that was standing in the way of her testifying at the committee. It isn't clear if that's really what was happening, but there was a lot of talk about that during the hearings this week. And it wasn't clear if she was actually going to be able to sit down and share her testimony. Now, what happened? She did. She stood by all the statements that she made, even though it was pointed out to her quite clearly that quite often during the pandemic, a lot of what she was saying was either self-contradicted, sometimes within days, or others within the CDC came out and contradicted what she said or walked back what she had to say on a number of policies and on a number of initiatives, including masking. So anyway, it also came down to, the efficacy of vaccines, whether people could or could not spread the virus after they were injected with the vaccine. Questions surrounding whether you could still get sick or if you could become infected after you were vaccinated, and during this hearing, it was pointed out that many times, especially early in the pandemic, early in the rollout of the vaccines, the public was assured, even by the president, Joe Biden, that if you were vaccinated, you couldn't get sick, you wouldn't end up in the hospital, you wouldn't die, you couldn't spread the disease. The media also echoed exactly that message. assured people over and over again that it was completely, totally safe. It was 97, 98% effective. And then over time, we saw that a lot of what we were being told wasn't entirely accurate. Well, here's the exchange. Let's pull this up and show you what happened between Jordan and Walensky during the hearings this week. I wanted to run this earlier in the week. We just simply didn't have the time. But here is an opportune time tonight to share exactly this bombshell stuff. And honestly, at this point, not really surprising. But what is kind of surprising is that Walensky still sits here and doubles down on the whole thing.
For 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Walensky, it's good to have you here today. Thank you for being with us. It was funny, I was just talking to Dr. Howery today.
It'll come up after.
Who was my old attending at Grady and Emory when I was a resident. I will say also thank you for your service during the pandemic. I too was on the front lines of this pandemic from the very beginning, all the way through December of this last year.
Defending her, kind of
the entire evolution of this disease process with dismay.
But she was
at times
also
that we politicized it so much. As a matter of fact, I would make the case that probably the biggest mistake in this, I'm going to ask your opinion on this in a second, the biggest mistake maybe we made of all the different things, the different guidances and everything like that, that's all fine. I think we did our best. But the biggest problem is, and a lot of people point this out all the time, is we let this become political rather than medical, rather than a healthcare question. Whether instead of letting doctors talk to their patients about this, we had politicians talking to prompters. You had people who had access to you.
Listen,
to try to give you input, did, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Rather than doctors. I remember Jerry Williams, a doctor out who's an urgent care physician who treated thousands and thousands of patients with great success. Wanted to have access, but couldn't get access, but a teacher's union gets to have your personal cell phone number. I think that's egregious because it became political. I think you're a scientist. I think you're a person who understands an infectious disease process. Do you think that the biggest problem, I think the biggest problem, and I'm going to ask you if you think this is the big problem, the biggest problem with all the misinformation, with all the fact that we had black liberals and white conservatives both mistrusting this disease and not doing the right thing, a lot of times not following the science, because both sides were politicized so bad that nobody could figure out what the truth was anymore. Because it was politicized, we couldn't get to the truth. Would you agree that was one of the biggest problems we had with this disease?
Yeah, I would say that, first I want to say that many scientists and state health officers, I have given every one of our state health officers my direct cell phone at some point in time over the last 2.5 years so that they had access to me too, so that they could see what was happening on the ground. So that was not that was a frequent event that people would have access to me. I do think that when politics have become involved in what we are trying to frame, what it should be framed as a medical health measure, we get mis and disinformation, we get vitriol splashed across the pages of public health workers doing the hard work of public health. We get threats to our public health workers that limit what they are able to do and have them have fear in terms of doing their job and doing it properly. Poor press, I think all of this is politicized and frames a really difficult situation to trying to do our best in health and public health.
One of the things that was interesting is I too was threatened with my license. I did get censored as a physician who treated thousands of COVID patients by people on the internet, by people in government, telling me I couldn't express my professional opinion as a doctor and as a scientist. Ironically, it goes full circle, and it came once again from the politicization of this, where people thought they were experts based on I'm powerful, rather than I actually know what I'm talking about. And ironically, the things they censored me on, I turned out to be correct on. They wouldn't even allow a dialogue of medical professionals to actually debate the science on a national scene, rather than just one size fits all. We're going to let the government decide what's truth. And this is the problem I have with this. You mentioned during the opening statements, you said, or actually during the open question, you said that we didn't get information on vaccinated hospitalizations, which surprised me. I thought we did have some of that. I imagine that also carried over to ICU visits and probably deaths too, because we don't have that.
Just to be clear, we don't have that at a national level. We at CDC collect data in cohorts so that we can follow that for vaccine effectiveness studies. But at a national level, we get hospitalization data, we get hospitalization for COVID data. But at a national level, we have never been able to get hospitalization, vaccination, and COVID.
Yeah, so that worries me because it seems to skew the data. And I see you nod your head, yes, I agree.
Well, I think it just speaks to the real challenges in our data flows and our ability to give data back to the American people when we don't have full line of sight of all the data that people are interested in.
Couldn't agree with you more, which I spent so much time. Every time I admitted a patient, every time anybody was tested for, I filled out an egregious amount of EHR paperwork in order to answer every question before I did any treatment or any admission. And yet, we never collected data on one of the most important statistics of all, which is vaccinated patients and the effectiveness of hospitalizations versus ICUs versus deaths. It wasn't a fair conversation. It seems like that was avoided. Were you asking for that information, or was that just something that they didn't want to collect?
So, Dr. McCormick, let me just be clear. We were looking at that in our vaccine effectiveness cohorts, in our VISION and IV cohorts, so that we could report that out on vaccine effectiveness data. We were looking at that because we knew that that was critically important. But I do want to emphasize that we did not get data in aggregate. We are, again, just to be clear, we're not looking for PII here. We did not get data in aggregate on vaccination and hospitalizations. All that data that you're filling out in the EHR does not translate into public health data. And that is really why I've said our data highways are so clearly important if we are going to report on what is, on the outcomes that people are asking for. And our data authorities are so clearly important so we can present those data in aggregate.
And what's interesting, how much money we spend on that EMR or EHR every single year, billions, tens and tens or maybe hundreds of billions of dollars collecting information that you can't get a hold of.
And maybe if I could just say it again, hundreds of billions of dollars. We've gotten less than $1 billion for our data highways across the country, 3,000 health departments for our data modernization initiatives.
All right. Are you aware of the must-admit orders that some states, including New York, were using to send COVID positive patients to nursing homes early on in this disease process?
You'd have to say more. I'm not sure.
So
come on.
Remember when we first had this pandemic started, and we didn't really know a whole lot. We just knew it was contagious upper respiratory infection as an infectious disease. By the way, this is not in the capacity of a CDC director. This is capacity of an infectious disease doctor. We're talking doctor science here.
Cuomo put them in there.
They had originally the must-admit orders that some states were using in order to push patients who were positive for COVID back to the nursing homes. Are you familiar with that?
Patients straight into the nursing homes.
Okay.
Oh,
Would you say it was a good idea to send infected COVID patients back to the most vulnerable community of all, which is nursing homes?
I can't speak to that. I was not aware of that. What I can, because what was the counterfactual? What was the alternative of them going there? What were the mitigation strategies?
Trump sent the hospital ships. They never used them.
So I think that there are a lot of
they could have been isolated right there on those in those facilities.
I think you might be a better politician than me right now.
Yeah, no
But
kidding.
I would say that if you were to be a scientist,
I am a scientist,
and to be a doctor who is talking about putting infected COVID. Now, I know how much time we spent and effort we spent separating our patients at the hospital, the COVID patients from the people who are not positive. And I would say, I'll just make the statement for you. It's a bad doggone idea to send infected COVID patients, one of the most deadly diseases, as you stated, back to the most vulnerable populations of all by direction of the state, by their legislative actions. And with that, I yield.
Yeah.
I now recognize Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, why did you and the Biden administration mislead the American people?
You'd have to say more. I wouldn't claim
March
that
29, 2021, vaccinated people do not carry the virus. Vaccinated people don't get sick. We got that information from clinical trials, but also real world data. It seems to me there are a number of statements you make in there that aren't accurate. Do vaccinated people carry the virus?
In March of 2021, the vast majority of data demonstrated that the vast majority of people were not getting infected if they were vaccinated.
That's not what you said. You didn't say the vast majority of people. You said vaccinated people do not carry the virus. Was that accurate?
It was generally accurate.
Generally accurate. Why not just be accurate? Why not just tell the American people the truth? Why not you say to the American people just what you said to me? We're big boys and girls. We pay your salary. The government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people. Why not just tell us the truth?
I was speaking.
Was 6 weeks later when you said if you were to get infected during post-vaccination, you can't give it to anyone else. Was that accurate?
What was the date of that?
May 19, 2021.
At the time, we had the Wuhan strain and then the alpha strain. That was the alpha strain that was circulating. That was generally true, yeah.
Generally true again? Why not again? Why not tell the American people this is generally true?
I couldn't tell you the exact data on the vaccine effectiveness of symptomatic disease and severe disease at the time. What I can tell you is that we generally saw that if you were to get infected after you had been vaccinated, that you were not carrying the virus by transmitting it to somebody else. You could not transmit it to others.
But we know that's not accurate.
It was at the time. Now, what
Really?
happened? Yes, in
Really?
May of 2021. That was true for
Really?
the alpha variant. What
Let
happened?
me ask you about all the general statements that were made to the American people, not general statements, the way you guys said it. You said, was it our tax dollars, were our tax dollars used in the lab in China?
That is something that you would have to speak to NIH about.
Our tax dollars were used. It sure looks like it was gain of function research. It sure looks like it actually came from the lab. And we've had several agencies, federal agencies, say that's in fact where the virus originated. The Biden administration told us that the vaccinated couldn't get it. We know that's not accurate. The Biden administration told us the vaccinated couldn't transmit it. They told us masks worked, and they told us there was no such thing as natural immunity. That seems to me to be, 7 different statements that turned out not to be true that we got from this administration. Again, why not just tell the American people the truth?
So I would dispute some of what you just said. In October 2021, CDC released a scientific brief highlighting all of the science that was out there on infection-induced immunity. And I don't know the long list I don't remember all the long list, but there are numerous areas where we have provided science and the science review to provide data to the American people as soon as we had it.
I actually think what happened is you actually tried to be honest with the American people, and the Biden administration shot you down. You remember when you said this in February? This is before you made these statements, which I think are not being square with the American people. You said vaccination of teachers is not a prerequisite for safely reopening schools. Did you make that statement?
Something to that effect. I can't exactly say the quote, but yeah.
Vaccinations of teachers is not a prerequisite for safely reopening schools. I think you made that statement on February 3rd. Do you stand by that statement?
At the time, yeah. We had a week later or 10 days later, we had an operational guidance that demonstrated layered mitigation strategies and that you could safely reopen.
Were you speaking as Dr. Walensky, or were you speaking as Dr. Walensky, head of the CDC?
I have said that while I've been in front of Congress and the media and press conferences, during my tenure as CDC director, I've been speaking as the CDC director.
But that's not what the White House said, right? Jen Psaki said Dr. Walensky spoke to this in her personal capacity. Do you remember that statement?
I do.
Who's right?
Jen
Psaki or you?
Well, I will tell you that I was speaking in my
Looks
role
to me,
as the CDC director.
looks to me like what happened is in February, you said, I'm going to be honest with the American people. I'm going to give it to them straight. Vaccination of teachers is not a prerequisite for safely opening schools. And the Biden administration hung you out to dry. They said, nope, she ain't talking for us. She ain't talking as the head of the CDC. She's talking as Dr. Walensky. And then a month later, you said, well, you know what? I better not be totally honest with the American people. So I'm going to say vaccinated people do not carry the virus and they don't get sick. And everyone understands, like, wow, I know someone who's been vaccinated and they've gotten sick afterwards. I think what happened is you tried to be honest and they said no. And then you said, well, I'm going to have to hedge a little bit. I'm going to have to give the American people misleading statements from the head of the CDC. You were speaking as head of the CDC in both situations, right?
I have said I've been speaking as the head of the CDC.
All the time? Yeah. Well, it'd been nice if you'd have just been honest and straightforward with the American people every single time throughout this virus. With that, I yield back.
I have stood by my commitment to tell the American people what I know when I know it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I now recognize Mr. Garcia from California.
Yeah. Why couldn't they just be straight up and honest with people? It was political. The whole thing was politicized. Earlier in the hearings, there were statements made where some were wishing that the pandemic had united people, united Americans, well, they didn't say Canadians, but I think the sentiment is the same. Behind a common cause of defeating the virus, but it didn't work out that way at all. Instead, it divided the country. It divided the world. It was used as a political tool. It became a wedge. It pitted one group of people against the other. They victimized, targeted, dehumanized people who didn't do the thing. They absolutely did. And blamed it, blamed the spread on people who didn't do the thing, who didn't comply. It was disgusting. It was terrible. It was a test. Oh, I'm sure they weren't looking at it that way at the time. Maybe they don't even look at it that way now, but it absolutely was a test. You know, when people are asked if you were alive at the time of Hitler and you knew what he was going to do, and you knew what the fascists, the Nazis, were going to do, what would you do? Would you take steps to stop him? Or the other question, maybe the more relevant question here is, and it's often asked, if you were alive at the time as we were heading into World War II and you saw the rise of fascism, what side would you come down on? Would you participate? Would you stay silent in order to protect yourself, to keep yourself from being targeted by the Nazis and the fascists themselves? Would you allow others to be victimized? Would you have allowed the Holocaust to happen, or would you have stood against it? Well, it seems to me some people failed the test. And I know some people will sit there and say, oh, it's not fair to compare the two things. Well, I think that it kind of is. I think that it is fair. Because the process has been the same. And it isn't over yet. You can tell, even from the testimony here that we're just listening to right now, with Walensky kind of doubling down, defending what she did, not saying, yeah, maybe that was an error. Maybe we could have, improved on the way that we delivered messaging. Admit that the actions and the words used by government and government institutions like the CDC eroded public confidence in those institutions, confidence that I don't think has been restored and may never be restored. Nope, they're just doubling down. Double down. CYA. The good news is every day a little more truth comes out. Every day we see progress. Every day we get closer and closer to some kind of normalcy again, or it seems that way. But we have a long, long way to go. And on the road back there, we're going to be seeing a lot of people covering their butts. Sad but true. I'll be right back.
Fighting the Great Reset by leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind.
Okay, off to the White House we go now for a little bit of the press, a bit of a press briefing there. Secretary of State about to head off to China. So let's find out what was said about that today in the media briefing.
The Secretary of State's upcoming two-day visit to China is very noteworthy in the sense that a U.S. Secretary of State hasn't traveled to China since 2018. What's the overall goal?
I mean, I just look, State Department has talked about it. I just spoke about it from this podium just moments ago about the objectives and the goal. We think it's important. This president thinks it's important to have diplomacy, to continue to have those conversations with a country that's going to be a major player on the world stage, right? But we've been very consistent. We believe we've strengthened America's ability to outcompete China because of the economic actions and policies that we have taken. And we think it's important to have those open lines of conversation, keep those channels open. And so we're going to continue to do that. Diplomacy is important. He is, as you just stated, Blinken is the Secretary of State. That is one of his jobs, right, to have those conversations. And so those are the objectives. And, we're going to continue to move forward in that direction.
It's a very complex relationship, the U.S. and China. There's trade, there's national security, there's human rights. I'm curious, do you, as the administration, view China as you described, a competitor, or are they also an adversary?
Look, what we see right now is that they're certainly going to be a major player, right? They're going to be continue to be around. And so because of that, we need to do our part, right? And have that diplomacy, have those conversations, and continue to strengthen our hand. America's ability to outcompete China, which we believe we have put ourselves in a good footing to do that. So we're going to have the conversation, continue to open the lines, the channels to have those conversations, and I think that's what matters. I think that's what the American people want to see. Go ahead, Courtney.
Thank you. What's the status of the Pandemic Preparedness Office now that Dr. Jha is leaving?
Okay, so that meeting is really actually very important. But I don't think Blinken is the right guy to send, because that guy is a saber rattler. He's pro-war. Blinken, that worries me a lot. This visit was delayed. Now it's happening. It's going to happen with all the tension in the Taiwan Strait, the conflict, the disagreement over the future of Taiwan, the corruption that we're seeing, seeing exposed with regard to the president, the laptop. We know that it's not just ties to Ukraine, but also ties to China. Questions surrounding all of that. How is all that playing out? Well, I don't know, but we are on the brink of an escalation of what I believe is already World War III. China is an integral part of that. The United States is in decline. China is on the rise economically. And Blinken just has a long track record of initiating aggression. I don't think that he's the right guy to send over there if you want peace. It's the opposite of that. He's going to go in there, and he's a hardliner. There's not going to be much diplomacy. If anything, I'm afraid that it will just inflame things more. And I think that might actually be the goal. I'm not sure how it all plays out, because you can, many people believe that Biden is just a bagman for the Chinese, and the conflict that's sort of erupting over there. I don't know. So a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. It's sort of like not just 3D chess or 4D chess. It's maybe 5D chess. It's really unpredictable. It's weird, but just the fact that Blinken is going, that is enough for me to be more than worried. Back to Canada now briefly. You know that $13 billion deal that the federal government coughed up for Volkswagen to build this huge electric vehicle battery facility in St. Thomas, Ontario, one of the biggest in the world? Well, now we're finding out that $13 billion just isn't going to cut it. I think that is, without question, the largest public-private partnership in the auto industry in the history of the country, and certainly one of the biggest in North American history. This is a world scale deal. And the $13 billion announced by the federal government just weeks ago, now it's just not enough. Here's a report on this tonight. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland in Canada says today that the federal government plans to make the production subsidies it's offering to Volkswagen tax-free to match the incentives offered by the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. So these comments come after the parliamentary budget officer published a report saying that Canada's contract with Volkswagen to build this electric vehicle battery plant in St. Thomas would cost the government now $16.3 billion over the next 10 years. $16.3 billion. Just to put that in perspective, the $13 billion originally announced, that's half of Canada's federal military budget. Half. Going to one company. If you can believe that. That is just insane. So they're going to make that tax-free. Yeah, and then they sit there and say, oh, we have to make sure those corporations pay their fair share. It's not even funny. It is a joke, but it's not funny. When they say they're going to make those corporations pay their fair share, it's a joke. You'll pay your taxes. You'll pay for that $16 billion to go to Volkswagen. We'll all pay for it. All of us. And all the other factories, too, that are all getting subsidies. That's just the tip of the iceberg, my friends. $16 billion to Volkswagen, a few more billion over here, another $10 billion over there. All the auto companies get money now. All of them. They're all lining up. All of them. I did see that at a shareholders meeting for Toyota, just within the last number of days, they had some people kind of pushing back on all this electric vehicle stuff, but they're still committed. Some people, like some shareholders, pushing back on the EV strategy, and their CEO has also indicated that really the EV initiative is not viable, and they've backed off. They're not taking the lead on this stuff. I think actually the CEO of Toyota is on the right track. He's letting these other companies kind of take the initiative. Toyota's kind of coming up in behind. They're letting the other companies, I think, take more of the risk up front. While Toyota comes in not in the back, but sort of middle of the pack, still committed to doing what they need to do. From a business perspective, I think they're taking the right approach because they're still there to get the government subsidies, which I disagree with, but all the companies are getting them, and you can't survive now in the industry if you don't get some of that, or as much as everybody else. But if you're up front trying to lead the charge on the technology, you'll also take the losses if you don't get it right, if the technology that you're helping to develop doesn't bear fruit. It's risky. New technology, always risky. And sometimes the people who are right up front don't always profit. Sometimes it's just smarter to kind of hang back a little bit, see how things develop, avail yourself of the technological advancements, kind of cherry pick where you want to go in and what kind of research you want to engage in, R&D. And those people at Toyota, they are not stupid. They're pretty smart. That's why they've been around as long as they have been. That's why the company has grown into, really, I think the leading automaker in the world, Toyota. Honda's in there too. And that's why they keep eating the lunch of companies like General Motors and Stellantis, Chrysler. I think they're smart, but it's an ongoing process. Speaking of government regulation, government grants, government subsidies, mainstream media in Canada today, CTV announcing huge layoffs. Huge. thousands of, I think 1,300, 1,500 employees are being laid off. 1,300. And they're closing down 6 radio stations. Now, as you know, I used to work for them. I take all this with a little bit of a grain of salt. CTV is saying that this is happening because advertising revenue is on the decline. More money is going over to social media companies like Facebook, Google, etc. And even though Bill C-18 has been passed, which is designed to force the social media companies like Facebook and YouTube and others to pay mainstream media companies, legacy media companies like CTV, Global, CBC, and others to inject money into them. The executives at CTV are saying it's too little, too late. We're not going to stick around and continue to just fund our news operations and lose money, because some of the platforms like Facebook are saying, well, we're just either going to limit or even block news content. We just won't run it. We won't allow it to on our platforms. If we're forced to pay for it, it isn't worth it to us. You can't just shift the expense over to us to operate your legacy news outlets. I don't think the public in general is that worried about it or concerned. In fact, I think a lot of people are probably rejoicing tonight because they see what the mainstream media is and that they've become a mouthpiece for the government anyway. That's why people call them fake news. So here they are laying people off, even though they've been funded by the federal government certainly since the pandemic. You know, the flow of money from the federal government to all forms of mainstream media began in Canada. And even with that additional funding, no, they're still going to lay people off. I take it with a grain of salt, as I say, because CTV is owned by Bell Media, which owns half the cell phone towers probably in Canada, probably half the internet infrastructure. They own probably half the radio stations, half the newspapers, half of the television stations, half of the specialty channels. And it goes on and on and on. So if you consume any kind of media, even if you're online yourself, they're basically getting a piece of the pie no matter what. And then these companies are all integrated. They share their towers back and forth for cell phones. And that's how the industry is set up. And the head of CTV and Bell Media, those executives over there are saying, well, the government has set up a very competitive environment. No, it's not very competitive at all. It's an oligopoly. It's a handful of big corporations that control all the media assets in Canada, which is why we pay some of the highest cell phone rates in the entire world in Canada. And they've limited and even prevented competition from the United States from coming into the Canadian market for the cell phone industry in the past. And even though they're trying to foster more competition, it really isn't true competition. As a result, 1,300 people being laid off. But that's the whole time I worked there. They would always go through a series of layoffs, and they would always have, cite some government regulation or some reason for doing it. And it's a game that they play. All these media companies engage in the practice. They just lay off a whole bunch of people. They clean house. They say it's the government's fault. It's because of too much regulation, lack of regulation, lack of support, whatever it might be. And they just come up with these reasons. Oh, now we have to lay a bunch of people off. They're going to sell some other radio stations as well, including one of the oldest, most, I guess, one of the best known radio stations, both on Canada and the U.S. side, in Windsor, Ontario, right on the U.S.-Canadian border. it's a process that they go through every once in a while, and I think they use it for a variety of purposes. Layoffs. It helps them get around union rules. It also helps them put pressure on government to get what they want, whether it's to sell off broadcast or other media assets or to acquire others. It's a business strategy. It also allows them to purge their staffing, to get rid of people that they really want to get rid of. They can't, where they otherwise wouldn't be able to, but they use this as an excuse. That's the way CTV operates. And as some people are saying tonight, the real message that they're sending to the employees is you have no job stability, no job security here. It's kind of true. The whole time I was there, people were always on pins and needles. They were always worried about their jobs. Yeah, the union was able to provide some protection through seniority, but especially people at the lower end or in the middle, they were very, very worried. And I saw the way that they would even reclassify jobs and do other sort of systemic changes in order to target specific employees and get rid of them. Sometimes people who had been there for decades. It was pretty nasty. That's the way the broadcasting industry is. And I think it's probably similar in the United States as well, where there's probably even less job security. In fact, I think in many respects, that's the case down there. But there is more competition. The industry is a lot different down there. And the industry tonight, saying that, CTV saying this is all the government's fault. And yet here's the government really coming forward with legislation that's designed to protect them, to provide regulatory protection. And CTV saying, oh, it's not going to work anyway. It's not enough. It's too little, too late. Going to have to lay a bunch of people off. So then they'll get the regulatory protection, plus they get to cut their expenses, purge their staffing rules, and reduce service to the public. And that's what they're doing too. They're going from what they say is a vertically integrated management system to a horizontal management system. They're getting rid of, I guess, about 20% of their executives, their bosses in the news departments. And what they're going to is sort of a single newsroom approach. So what they're really doing is they're going to shut down a lot of local newsrooms and regional news operations, consolidate everything. From what I'm reading, this is what I gather, and it may not be entirely accurate, but from what I'm reading, this seems to be the new model that they're going to employ. They're going to have their national newsroom, and then they're going to sort of dictate out to bureaus of some kind what they need for coverage, and they're going to have a much more scaled down news operation, getting rid of a lot of employees. And I think you're going to end up with less local news coverage, less local news, period. And you'll get it all sort of from a central source. Everything will feed into a central source. So we'll see how they set up their operation. But that is what I see kind of happening there on that front. And that's sending shockwaves through the entire media industry in Canada tonight. And people in the United States should take note as well. It's not as volatile down there in some respects because the media market is so much bigger. It's over 10 times larger on the US side. But the shift in revenue from legacy mainstream media to social media, make no mistake, it is making it difficult for smaller media operations in particular to survive, and it's giving the big corporate media bosses an excuse to make more cuts to their operations. What else tonight? 4 people charged with stealing and selling human body parts from the Harvard Medical School. So they had this theft ring, and they were stealing human body parts. Indictments have been handed up from a grand jury in Scranton, Pennsylvania. targeting morgue manager Cedric Lodge, 55 years old, and his wife Denise Lodge, 63 years old. They live in Goffstown, New Hampshire. So this resident from Salem, Massachusetts, Katrina McLean, she's 44 years old, and West Lawn, Pennsylvania man Joshua Taylor, he's 46. They've also been indicted in this alleged scheme. McLean is the owner and operator of a store called Cat's Creepy Creations. So all these people are accused of conspiracy and conspiracy and interstate transport of stolen goods, body parts. Wow. This is, in fact, not the first time we've seen this kind of thing happen. We reported on a similar story about 6 months ago. Different set of circumstances, different locations, but similar kind of thing going on. So in a statement from federal prosecutors, they said, quote, "At times, Cedric Lodge allowed McLean and Taylor to enter the morgue at Harvard Medical School and examine cadavers to choose what to purchase." It goes on and says, on some occasions, Taylor transported stolen remains back to Pennsylvania. On other occasions, the lodges shipped stolen remains to Taylor and others out of state. Cedric Lodge, quote, "stole dissected portions of donated cadavers, including, for example, heads, brains, skin, bones, and other human remains without the knowledge or permission of HMS." That's all in the indictment. It's a 15-page indictment. It did not go into extended detail over what the body parts were purchased for, but it does mention how McLean allegedly shipped human skin to a man in Pennsylvania. And again, quote, "and engaged in his services to tan the skin to create leather." How could this even happen? This is Harvard we're talking about. McLean asked Cedric Lodge to supply more tissue to send to, quote, "the dude I send the chest piece to tan." That's also in the indictment. So between September 3rd, 2018 and July 12th, 2021, Taylor sent, apparently, allegedly, 39 electronic payments for a total of $37,355.56 to a PayPal account run by Denise Lodge for human remains that Cedric Lodge stole from Harvard, again, according to the indictment. A May 19th, 2019 payment from Taylor also had a memo. It says head number 7, and a November 20th, 2020 transaction was for brains, spelled BRAIIIIIIIIIIINS. Appalling. So, again, in this statement, quote, it says here, "the reported incidents are a betrayal of HMS and, most importantly, each of the individuals who altruistically chose to will their bodies to HMS through the anatomical gift program to advance medical education and research." This from the Harvard Medical School statement, which also says, "we are appalled to learn that something so disturbing could happen on our campus, a community dedicated to healing and serving others." Wow, just wow. Wow. Everybody's worried about the Trump indictment. Worried on one side or worried on the other. And, oh yeah, I also wanted to mention one of those radio stations is being shut down. I grew up listening to that station. So it's kind of making me sad tonight. CJBK 1290 AM, London, Ontario. Grew up listening to that. It was a powerhouse station back in the day. It wasn't always number one. It wasn't number one, but it used to play all the hits. And when I was a kid, I used to go to the record store, and they had these little standy things at the record store right by the cash register. And they had, the top 40 songs listed, and you could get these little paper pamphlets. And I don't know what it was, man, back in the time, but this was in the 1970s. Everybody listened to that station, and the kids all started to collect these little pamphlets with the top 40 songs listed every week, and they'd print a new one, and they'd put that by the cash register at all the record stores. And every week you'd go and you'd find out, well, what are the top songs? What's the number one song this week? And they'd announce it on the radio, but you'd also pick up the pamphlet and it would all be printed on there. And it was like this huge promotion. And it was very effective. And accompanying that, they had one of the most intelligent, smartest, most effective promotional campaigns going, period. The whole campaign went like this. If they would call random numbers, this was back in the day, of course, when you just had landlines, no cell phones. And they would just phone a random phone number out of the phone book. And if the person who picked up the phone said, I listened to CJBK 1290, you would win $1,000. So everybody in the city started answering their phone that way. You had to just pick up your phone and say, I listened to CJBK 1290. And if it was the radio station on the other end, you'd win $1,000. So people who didn't even listen to the station started to say that. It became this huge advertising campaign for the station. It was highly effective. One of the smartest things ever. And of course, you'd phone up your friend and they'd pick up the phone and they would say that, and then it would become funny. And you'd say, oh, you do you? It was hilarious. My mom started to do it. Everybody did it. All my friends did it. And it didn't matter who you started to phone. Everybody in the city would say that when they'd pick up their phone. Well, that station went off the air because of these media cuts today. So little pang in my heart, making me a little weepy. Here's the statement. We have news to share about changes to News Talk 1290 CJBK as of 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on June 14th. 1290 CJBK is off the air. The realities of AM radio and the broadcast media landscape have made this change unavoidable. We want to thank our advertising partners, sponsors, and everyone who has contributed to this station over the years. But we especially want to thank you, our listeners. Thank you for welcoming News Talk 1290 CJBK into your homes, cars, and lives for so many years. And it wasn't always a talk station. When I was a kid, that was a top 40 rockin' station. AM, baby. That wasn't stereo either. That was mono. Mono, no stereo. But over time, the realities of the broadcasting industry took that station, which used to play music, and because it was only a mono, they moved it over to talk. And I assume they were probably broadcasting in AM stereo these days using that technology, but a lot of changes in the broadcasting industry. And now today, a bunch of Canadian stations off the air as a result of these cuts from CTV, Bell Media powerhouse, huge company, phone company, Bell Media. Started off as the phone company, and today, they own media assets across the spectrum, but a few fewer will be on the air moving forward as a result of everything that we just told you about. And I miss those days. I remember cruising down the highway with my brother. He was, older than me, so he had his driver's license and a car, and we'd cruise down to Port Stanley on Lake Erie in the summertime, and we'd have 1290 CJBK cranked up, and he was a big Elton John fan. And back in those days, if it wasn't Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, it was Crocodile Rock coming out of that single speaker on the front of the dash. And later, he had 2 speakers mounted in the back of his Chevy Nova with a 350 Chevy engine, V8. Those were the days, man. Those were the days. Don't go away. I'll be right back after this.
We are Mavericks. We say no to the Trudeau and Biden New World Order. And to bugs. Because bugs are creepy and gross. And people should not eat bugs. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Hey, no! 2 bucks!
So I'm just going to look in the comments here. We brought people on the air last night, not by telephone, but by video cam. Tell me what you think of that. Did you like that? Was that better than going to the phones or not? Some people messaging me today seemed to like it and other people not so much. I thought it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I thought it was interactive. It was nice to see people's faces. So just let me know in the comments there what you think. Is that something you'd like us to continue to do or no? Go back to the telephone thing or video? Video. I don't know. Lori says, loved the video calls. Thank you. Michael James says, those are the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. Yeah, no doubt, making reference to my trips and all of our trips out, on the weekends or whenever. And those, well, they weren't so old back then, those muscle cars. My brother's Chevy Nova. That was a cool car. Yeah. Marie says, yup. I think that means pro video calls. Curly May says, laugh out loud. I wouldn't want anyone to see my face. Well, that was part of the concern that I had. I wasn't sure if people would, a lot of people maybe are shying away from clicking on the link because they don't want their face on the screen too many at once. Yeah, possibly. Maybe I should only be bringing on one person at a time, which is what we generally do with the phone calls. Just put people in the queue there and deal with people one-on-one so they have the opportunity to speak, engage, and then move on to the next person. We could try doing more of that. Ellen says she liked the video. Rising Dragon says it was awesome. And he says he thinks the camera likes him. I think so too. Gina liked it. Thanks for participating last night, you guys. Both Rising Dragon and Gina were on the program. Isabel, I remember our Mustang convertible top down. Yeah, those are the days, man. Well, they're still here, kind of. See a lot of those old cars still around. Hey, Maverick's pretty dead in Rumble. Let me just check over there in Rumble and see what's going on. I have noticed that people are falling back into their own old ways. The numbers are going up over on YouTube and down over on Rumble because I think a lot of the people who subscribed over on Rumble have just reverted back over to YouTube. Old habits die hard. And yeah, the numbers are a little bit down over on Rumble and up on Facebook again, YouTube again. So I don't know. PDS says, yes, that was awesome. So pro cams, not so much the phones. Loved the video call. Well, we'll probably try more video calling and see how that goes. We'll maybe try a little bit of that again tonight. Let's see if you still like it. I thought it was pretty good. It is, after all, the 21st century. You don't have to rely just on telephones. Yeah, and Lori says she's on YouTube, hates YouTube, but doesn't like the Rumble app. Yeah, Rumble's a little bit glitchy. If you are over on Rumble, just a reminder that you can donate to support what we're doing here through the Rumble rants. We're demonetized on YouTube altogether. So can't even do a super chat thing in there right now. Trying to work on a workaround for that. But anyway, you can support the channel by donating through the Rumble rants, or you can donate at freedomreporters.com. I'll put that banner up there for you. freedomreporters.com. Where is it? So too many banners. There it is. freedomreporters.com. And again, I have a few t-shirts left. So anyone who donates tonight, $30 or more, I will send you a Maverick News t-shirt. And they are pretty nice. They're pretty good, fairly high quality. You can also donate at maverickdonations.com. maverickdonations.com. And same thing there. If you donate $30 or more, I will send you a t-shirt. Now, we do have only a handful left, only a few of these premium quality polo shirts with embroidery. It's not just the embroidery, it's the quality of the shirts too. They're a higher end shirt. And so anybody who donates $70 or more, I'll send you a polo shirt, one of the premium ones, as long as we have one left in your size. If not, I'll make other arrangements for you, but only a few of those left. So if you want one of those, now's your chance. I don't know if we'll get any more of those particular polo shirts in, maybe some other ones, but I don't think they'll be of the same quality. I was fortunate just to be able to get some of those high-end ones. So that's why we have to ask $70, because by the time we pay for the shirts and the embroidery and the shipping, because it's a little bit heavier, it's a little bit more expensive to send it out. And it's not so much about the shirts. It's really about supporting the channel. So you're not just buying the shirt, you're supporting the content, supporting what we do. It is a fundraiser. So that's what that's all about. Yeah. So what other news do we have for you tonight? The Trump indictment. Just to kind of bring you up to speed there, folks. He is still working on putting his legal team together. I know that. And of course, he was arraigned yesterday. Big thank you to Shay Eagle and Brian for bringing us that footage and then bringing us up to date live from Miami last night. They were there as Trump drove in and drove out. They stuck around all day, and we were there to record and report on all of the activities there, all the protests, everything that was going on. And then during our broadcast, they brought us up to date. Now, I would strongly encourage you to support what Shay is doing and go and check out what she has online on her Facebook page, Shay Eagle. If you want to watch more of that footage, you can find it on her Facebook platform. We ran some of that on the broadcast last night. And then, I think it was a great interview that we did with Shay, kind of analyzing and commenting on the whole Trump indictment. And she gave us the lay of the land, brought us, I think a good perspective on what the mood was like down there yesterday, as you really saw kind of clashing between the pro-Trump protesters and the anti-Trump protesters, made up largely, I think, of people from organizations like Antifa. Probably a mix there, I think, yesterday of about 70-30, 70% pro-Trump, 30% against Trump. And as Brian told us last night, during the festivities down there in Miami, outside the courthouse, there was a constant flow of people. The crowd probably consistently of about 5,000 people was his estimate, which seems to me to be probably fairly accurate. And Trump himself, I guess in the coverage that I guess he gave kind of a pretty powerful speech last night from Bedminster. And then on Fox, there was a graphic that they put up on the screen briefly where they called Biden a wannabe dictator. Apparently, the graphic was up on the screen for about 27 seconds before it was taken down. I haven't seen an actual screenshot of it anywhere, but it did happen apparently. And Fox says they addressed that, but I think they're trying to kind of ignore it and hope that the whole thing goes away. So that graphic went up while he was speaking to his supporters last night after his arraignment. Oh my. Kind of funny, really, in my estimation, but I'm not sure where that leaves Fox at this point. They called the president a dictator in an actual graphic on the screen. And of course, the people challenging Trump for the nomination on the Republican side, they're attacking him. They're trying to find a way to catch up, but he's so far out in front. And of course, all the attention now is focused on him. And Pence, some people are warning him, that he's going to pay a price for challenging Trump, because the MAGA people even within the Republican Party, make no mistake, they are largely predicting that he will be the nominee, even if he's in jail. Regardless of what you're seeing in the mainstream media, I'm seeing reports where they're saying that a lot of Republicans think he's really in trouble this time. I'm not so sure. Here's Jack Posobiec. I'm going to run a little clip from him. This one shared on Truth Social and really coming out of Rumble. But this is what he has to say about the way Pence is handling his challenge to Trump.
But this is where you'll have these spineless Republicans, spineless candidates who don't come around, don't go anywhere, don't do anything, will sit back and go, Mike Pence, oh, this is egregious conduct. Mike Pence knew that he had to be careful because he didn't want to spend another night in the punishment closet. And he's like, oh, my mother will send me back into the punishment closet if I don't come out against the big bad orange man. Mike, I'll tell you something right now. You're going to be spending a lot of nights in the punishment closet because Trump is going back to the White House. He's going to be reelected. The people of this country are sick of it. And you are going to have to pay the price in the punishment closet. Mother will send you there. And it's going to be a very, very, very rough 4 years when Trump goes in and starts actually cleaning up this country and everyone puts it on your head. So don't worry, Mike. You can wear your little leather the same way you do on your motorcycle.
No, that's a pretty tough. That's tough talk. And I know that right now there can't be any love lost between Trump and Pence. Not after what happened on J6. No. So again, man, I think that we're just getting a little tiny taste of what's to come as we head into that next presidential election. If you think things are heated now, I don't think we've seen anything yet. Not a thing. It's going to get just raucous in the streets. It's going to make these previous elections, it's going to make them seem like a day at Sunday school, especially if Trump actually ends up in jail. Can you imagine? People are going to lose it. They're playing with fire. This is dangerous stuff. Now, will Trump actually do anything if he gets reelected? Will he actually clean house? He had 4 years. And a lot of people feel like in many respects, he let the country down because he wasn't aggressive enough. He didn't do what he said he was going to do. He didn't drain the swamp. Now, maybe that's a lot to ask. I don't think even he realized how deep the swamp was. And then he ended up with swamp creatures all around him. maybe too trusting, maybe he's part of the swamp. I don't know. I'll take Biden, or I'll take Trump over Biden any day of the week, though, if it comes down to that choice. I will absolutely take Trump over Biden. RFK Jr., that may be a different story. That's the guy Trump really needs to be afraid of, not Pence, not Chris Christie, not Ron DeSantis, none of the other people vying for the nomination. I think he'll just dispose of those guys. I think Trump will be the nominee. On the Democrat side, though, it is possible that RFK Jr. could be the nominee because I'm not sure Biden's going to last that long. I think there's a high probability that he will self-destruct. Trump isn't the only politician that the authorities, the political powers that be want to throw in jail. Chris Sakoccia, running for the mayor's job in Toronto, one of the most, I guess, prominent freedom fighters in Canada, running in this mayoral by-election to become mayor of the biggest city in Canada. He was in jail yesterday. He had to turn himself into the cops. I still do not know at this point what the charges were, but he's now out. He turned himself in around 5:30 a.m. yesterday. And now he's out. And he's posted a new video. I haven't even watched this yet, but I want to bring it to you because I know a lot of our viewers have a high level of interest in this story. So let's see what Chris Sky has to say tonight.
What's going on, everybody? So I spent almost 21 hours in jail. I was subjected to some cruel and unusual punishment, but I'm in good spirits. Why? Because I know I'm going to beat those charges. I'm out. They didn't stop me. They didn't slow me down. And they were smart enough to put my video on CP24 to let all you know that all you have to do to save yourselves, save your family is vote for me. They literally, the mainstream media couldn't even deny it. So guys, I'm going to go take a shower now because I'm pretty jailed out, but I'm feeling good. I'm looking good. And we got to take this in stride. They're going to come after me every day. I'm used to this. All we need to do is fight back. And how are you going to fight back? June 26th, number 82, Chris Sakoccia for mayor. When I win, it's going to be glorious.
So there you go. He's out of jail. I'm not sure what to make of all of that. Again, I don't even know what the charges were. He never said. Not that I've seen. Maybe he has. I haven't seen it. Whatever. Media generally trying to ignore him, except now he's been arrested, so he finally got some attention on mainstream media. Got a teeny weeny bit of media attention when he announced when he finally officially registered as a candidate. I think he got a mention, but not really being mentioned in mainstream media reports and the polling, not being included in sort of like the top 4 contenders in the poll results. So based on the polling, it doesn't look like he's in the running, but who knows, man? Who knows? Anything can happen in politics, I guess. Right out in front, though, is Olivia Chow, former, like the wife of the late Jack Layton, who is the former leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada, as I told you before. And it is an election of note, something we will be keeping an eye on because it is Canada's largest city. The mayor of Toronto has not just a national voice, but an international voice and can influence public policy, not just at the municipal level, but way beyond that as well. So it is a big deal. Now, is Chris Sky really in it to win it? I'm not sure. He says he is. The issues that he's been focusing on seem to be freedom oriented and directed at his base of support. That's what he keeps speaking to. So I'm not sure if his strategy has been effective because he needs to expand his base of support in order to win the election. But maybe we'll get him back on to talk more about it before we get to election day. Not sure. He was on here the one time, and he did have a very strong grasp of all the municipal issues. He actually did impress me, I have to say. I asked him tough questions, real questions, fair questions, and he came back with real answers, and I was impressed. Somebody who follows Chris Sky, follows the freedom movement, and I'm not sure exactly where she falls politically, ideologically. She seems to get the wrath of people on sometimes both sides of the political, from all sides of the political spectrum. It's Kareem Assad, lawyer. So tonight, Kareem Assad posting a statement of claim against an online media entity called Canada Proud. This is, I think, kind of unusual. Again, it makes me kind of go, where does she fall politically? I'm getting kind of a sense, I think I sort of know where she is politically, but she says, Canada Proud used my footage without attribution or license, and now we are going to federal court. So it says here, I've been served, I guess, with this statement of claim. And Kareem Assad is a lawyer. She also is this live streamer, and I find her stuff very interesting. I like what she does because she just shoots content largely, doesn't even comment sometimes very much, or there's minimal content. She lets the events and the video speak for itself, and she's very effective at using the footage to simply make statements if you really watch it. And I think that's very fair. And I think she's sometimes very balanced. Mostly she's balanced. And I think that's why she suffers the wrath of people from various sides. But in this statement of claim, it says, to the defendant, a legal proceeding has been commenced against you by the plaintiff. The claim made against you is set out in the following pages. If you wish to defend this proceeding, you or a solicitor acting for you are required to prepare a statement of defense in form 171B prescribed by the federal court's rules, blah, 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 blah. You got 30 days after the day, blah, 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 blah. So basically, she's saying that these guys used some of her footage. And I went to Canada Proud. Here, I'll show you their online Facebook page. So I guess they just used her footage and didn't give her any credit. And of course, that's a copyright thing, right? And so Karima is saying, hey, you can't do that, which is kind of true. And people online, you have to be aware of copyright issues. Don't think that just because it's out there necessarily can absolutely use it. But a lot of this is kind of gray area too. When you post stuff to social media, it sort of becomes in the public domain. And actually, when you're posting stuff to Facebook, I think if you read the terms of the user terms, a lot of that footage, if not all of it, actually becomes their property. You stop owning it to some degree. There are ownership issues there. The same thing with all the social media platforms. So I'm not sure how this will play out either. But here's the Canada Proud page. And I would say that they're sort of freedom oriented. I'm not really familiar with them. I don't really look at their work, but, very critical of Biden. Here's a shocked, not shocked. Is anyone shocked by this? And there's a drag queen story here about a central Pennsylvania drag queen activist charged with 25 counts of child pornography. And that is a police release that goes back to January. So this is Karima kind of taking aim at a conservative, pro-freedom, more right-wing kind of social media platform, Canada Proud. That would make some people question, where she lands on the ideological spectrum. And yet she's out there, and she just, over the weekend was suffering abuse from, again, people on the neoliberal woke side. I think that's what you call journalism. That's what you call journalism, when people from various sides don't like you because you just balanced. People these days want media people to be cheerleaders, you know? Okay, so let me just take another brief break, and when we're going to come back, there's just a little bit of stuff I want to cover from the war in Ukraine, and then I think we'll probably have a little bit of time, and we can go to not just the phones, but those video cams again, and give that another whirl tonight. We'll see how that goes, and see if you guys still like it after we let people weigh in on the conversation.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So there's a lot of stuff being posted on social media about the war in Ukraine. Some of it, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I find some of it's concerning. And some of it, some people would say could be a war crime, because prisoners of war, generally speaking, they're not supposed to be paraded or shown on media. And yet here's more of this going on tonight. Says Russian soldiers who surrendered today are massively criticizing and saying bad things about their commanders who betrayed them. Look at their emotions. These are not memorized texts, as in the videos of the Russians. This is from someone online, Davana, a Ukrainian girl living in Ukraine and writing about my life in Ukraine and about Ukraine in English, more about me in the pinned post. Come in, blah, blah, blah. So whoever this Davana is. But here's these videos of captured or surrendered Russian soldiers, and you know, that's supposed to be a war crime. But I mean, we've seen it on both sides, right? Because if you are a prisoner of war, I'm not going to run this, by the way, but if you're a prisoner of war and they put a video camera on you, what are you going to say? It's the same thing if terrorists capture you, right? And they say, you will say this. How do you know if they're being coerced to say something? Or how do you know if they're saying something favorable? You know, this is something that you really have to wrestle with ethically. But there it is going on tonight. Russian soldiers surrendered, captured, whatever, being videotaped, and then Ukraine putting that stuff out there in social media, and it's being shared tonight. Very disturbing. Anyway, let me just share the link now to join the conversation here tonight. We'll go with the video thing again. So here, I'm going to put it in the comment section here in the chat. So there's the link right there. Anybody that wants to come on and join the conversation, you can do that. And I'll just add a little notation to it. Click on this link. To join the show, just click on this link. And I'll also post it over on Rumble. So if you're watching on Rumble, you can join the conversation there. To join the conversation, click on this link. Put that there and copy it. And there you go. So just click on that link and you can exercise your right to free speech right here tonight on the Maverick News Channel live. And we'll get to see some bright smiling faces again tonight. It is right now 7:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will take this brief break. And while I do that, you guys can get your webcams fired up, get your thoughts organized, get those jawbones ready to fly into motion tonight. And you can weigh in on the conversation. Don't go away. Be right back.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Okay, folks, I'm back. And first up tonight, Rising Dragon. Welcome back, sir. How are you tonight? Can you hear me? Dragon. Hello, sir. Cannot hear you. No audio. There we go.
What's up?
Now
Now it's
you
good.
are. Yeah. Well, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Hope you all good tonight. What's on my mind? Well, actually, I'm standing in front of my town hall to get the Wi-Fi. And, well, guess whose town hall is? Liberal. So, yeah, I'm having some fun in front of our Liberal building here. And also, what's on my mind?
And just for our viewers, Dragon, what city are you in? Because people, probably don't know.
Montreal.
Okay.
I'm from Montreal, Quebec. So, for those who doesn't know, here's my beautiful city. So, the thing is that I was thinking of working probably on a subject called late capitalism. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, late capitalism, yeah.
Well, it's probably a word that you're familiar with, but some of you don't. And this is what we're going through. Why my camera is gone? Okay, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah, late capitalism. It's a good subject, my friend, because we're in it, actually. For the simple reason that if you know the production versus what we consumer get or takes, and how this is being provided to us, now become a problem with all the problem that we see today since COVID restriction and so on, and even more with Ukraine and war.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm working on a little something that might be interesting for some viewers.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate more on what it is specifically that you're working on? You mean you're just working on what, an article or a just getting information?
Well, it's more, well, probably like an article, because yeah, actually that was my idea, if you're willing to it.
Sure.
Because I'm just starting to scrap the subject, but there's a lot into it that I've been looking into for a lot of years. Stop for a moment, and now I'm regaining some moment for myself to look into those things. I think I got something that our people will like to look at. What it is, actually, and we can go back since the era of industrialism back in the 1910, when actually Ford did created his production and the way he was producing the cars at the time, which was a lot of labor, and we needed to reduce the labor humanly possible. So the thing is that he started to make more mechanism for that. Okay, so we have now the mechanism around the labor that is reducing people's work, right? And today, with artificial intelligence and stuff like that, this is still ongoing. Okay, and it's part of the Marxism model. And actually, we've been living on a Marxism model for a long time. We haven't just realized it, or some people doesn't see it.
What do you mean that we're living on them? See, I watch a variety of economists, from Peter Schiff to Richard Wolff, and I've listened to Richard Wolff speak on this, and I'm with him to a certain point. His solution to the late capitalism problem and his solution through socialism to solve worker displacement, I disagree with, but I'll throw it back to you. So what do you mean that we're living on a Marxism model? Because I'm not sure that I entirely agree with it, but I need you to elaborate, maybe define or explain so that I fully understand what you mean.
Well, the Marxism is not as blatant as it's supposed to be. Actually, we're still going through it because we're not still or not yet completely into it. Problem is that, okay, look, now the people, okay, losing their work, right? People will work more at home. Artificial intelligence will actually probably put us on the shelf for a moment. And the thing is that if you look into Marxism, the way that our government will provide to us will actually just depend on how we produce. But how you get, okay, if we don't produce, I mean, we're not the one who's going to produce, it's going to be the machine, right? So how does that work? Now you're going into the socialist kind of speech. Well, this is where the socialism.
Oh, we lost Dragon. We lost Dragon. Well, maybe he'll come back. So let me give you my take on the whole thing. And I have listened to other economists. I've listened to a lot of arguments on both sides. I respect Richard Wolff, who is, one of the biggest names in economics in the United States right now, has been for quite a while. But again, I disagree with his solution to the artificial intelligent worker displacement problem, because his solution, I think, denies society as a whole the advantages and gains that economies of scale through technological advancement provide to all of humanity. But go ahead, Dragon, you're back.
Yeah, well, the idea is that I think that we're losing the production for the reason of, well, COVID first. And then what's going to happen is that, well, how can we live in a society where you don't produce enough, and actually what we take from that production will actually is leveling up at the point where, like, the globalism groups, what they want is that, or what we're looking at is there's too much of us taking for what we can produce, right? So this is where you get the shortage and the stuff like that. So where this is go, where I'm going with that, the idea is that where this manufacture function is broken in a system where now people is actually booming. We have more population, less production, and less stuff. We're going into, would say, where China is with the how you call that, the social credit thing. Okay, so what I see is that since Ford, okay, and our government today, since World War II even, the Nazis and the economic Marxism has never died. It's still ongoing. This is what I'm trying to find out.
Okay, so you're calling it economic Marxism. I would not define it that way. I would say that what we have is a corporatocracy. It's public-private partnerships. It's government and corporations working hand in hand. It's classic economic fascism. The difference between economic fascism and communism, or heavy socialism, is communists want to nationalize assets and keep it under the umbrella and control of government. The government runs things essentially. With fascism, they let the corporations run things, but the government dictates to the corporations through a variety of means how that production is going to occur and what they'll produce, how they'll produce it, where they'll produce it, how much of it they'll produce. And they do that through what we're seeing right now, massive government subsidies and regulations where they use a carrot and a stick approach, where they reward you by letting you grab the carrot if you are a good corporate citizen. And if you don't play, they beat you with a stick and punish you and maybe even deny you from existing or conducting business. So you really are left with no choice but to participate in the system. That's economic fascism.
Exactly.
The communists, the Marxists, they basically take over everything and they just try to run it through central planning entirely. So there's a private sector element to economic fascism, but the government still ultimately is in control and they become very authoritarian. None of that, I mean, the Marxists and the communists always characterize economic fascism as capitalism, which in a way it is, depending on how you define capitalism. Capitalism in its true definition is really people who use capital to make money without actually investing, without actually adding labor. Okay. They assume risk, invest their money, and then live off the interest from their capital investments. They're just living off their capital investments. That's capitalism. You're living off your capital, using the capital to basically leverage your wealth and use other people's labor in order to make yourself wealthier. That's capitalism. I'm a free
Basically
market guy.
slavery in a way.
It's sort of, well, you could say that, but you could also say it's a way of creating employment. It depends on how the system is set up. That's why you have labor unions to counterbalance that. I mean, if you're a capitalist, you're investing in the stock market. Even you, if you have any stocks or mutual funds, you're a capitalist. Even if you own government bonds, Canada savings bonds, now you're a capitalist. You've invested your capital. You're hoping to make a return on your capital invested and make money back. And you hope that it doesn't get eaten up by inflation over time. You're just using capital, using money to make money. You're not out there slaving away, trying to produce something. You're just hoping that your money becomes worth more money because you've invested it in something. Could be stocks, it could be a government bond, it could be a variety of different financial tools or instruments to do that. That's capitalism. I believe in the free market. I believe in a degree of capitalism and incorporated into that. And even within, a Marxist, socialist, communistic economic system, you see elements of capitalism there too, because they're using currency and investing and they allow people to have money and invest money as well. but it's all government controlled. It's really about who or how those control mechanisms are put into place. Before I go on, if you want to comment, I'll throw it over to you, Dragon.
Well, what I wanted to say is that, well, you're partly true, and this is what we have too. But I mean, if you look at the trend and what is kind of happening, I believe that we're probably going far into that direction over the Marxism type of model. Because,
well, there's no question.
Well,
of
if
that.
you
I mean,
look
there's
into
certainly a ton of government control. I'm talking about it tonight. The federal government giving over $16 billion to Volkswagen. That is, whether it's communism or economic fascism, it's economic socialism. And that is exactly what we saw playing out even before World War II in Germany, right? So it's corporatism, economic fascism, public-private partnerships. It's using our tax dollars to give to big corporations in order to control them.
Right. I mean,
so you're concerned.
I mean, I can still go on the subject.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Well, for those who's afraid of losing their job because of artificial intelligence. Whoops. My Wi-Fi is stupid tonight. So yeah, for those who's afraid of losing their job for artificial intelligence, I'd say don't be afraid. But the thing is that if we lose into producing or artists, for example, the artists today think that they are touched. Well, in a way, but our capitalism and actually corporatism, if you look into, say, an artistic way, all those people, the artist does money today with the copyright, right? So you don't want to touch that. But today, artificial intelligence, I think, is attacking our copyrights as artists. And
I find it interesting because some of those, I see material produced using artificial intelligence, and then the person who creates it or basically makes the request to an artificial intelligence program and gets the generated result back is then posting that material online or publishing it in other mediums, and they're actually claiming that to be copyrighted material. I'm not sure if that's even appropriate or how legal or lawful that is, because it isn't something that they necessarily created themselves. They basically asked a computer program to do it. So I'm not sure where that leaves us in terms of copyright. And I'm not sure how much originality there is going to be through the use of artificial intelligence to create works of art or even pieces of writing, because if you put the same inputs into a computer program as someone else, you're likely going to get the exact same results back. So now the copyright really comes down to who put those inputs into the computer first, who asked the computer to generate something first using those same orders. Do you see what I'm saying? It doesn't seem to me like it's necessarily an original work of art. So I'm not sure if something like that should even be copyrighted or if it should automatically go into the public domain. I'm not sure.
On that part, I'm not sure too, because if your artificial intelligence is the one who actually invent this piece of art, how does that work? That's a good question. How does a artificial intelligence program will have the copyright of the piece of art?
I mean, the question, you could argue that the creator of the artificial intelligence program maybe should be the owner of the copyright. But then on the other end of it, it's like, well, whoever came up with the request to go into the artificial intelligence system, first, that would be the person who created something. It would be the request that would be the actual copyrighted material and the resulting result, like the result of that, right? So maybe it's the request that is at the core of the copyright. It's not just the produced product, it's whatever parameters are set up within the request that you're putting into, say, Chat GPT, in order to get something written back. How you put that input in is what the result is that you get back. Again, this is all gray area. This is new ground, really, that needs to be explored, and we'll see what happens in the courts.
Well, I know a guy that likes to test out some stuff around that, and particular, like trying to do some weird thing and try to say, have a feeling of how those things can be in the work, and probably be dangerous at some point. Tim's in real life's podcast does that sometimes. So, and people might enjoy that one once in a while. But yeah, this guy is kind of crazy in a way. But yeah, I mean, ChatGPT is one thing that I'm afraid of, because you can make that thing do anything you want. It's scary. I can make you tell anything on the camera, and nobody would probably even know.
Yeah, and
it's kind of scary.
I'm going to come back to some of this maybe if we have time. I saw some ads running online today that used deepfake technology to have news anchors. I saw Elon Musk in these ads, but it wasn't Elon Musk. It was an artificially generated voiceover. You could sort of tell that it was artificially generated, and they were trying to sell people financial products. And I thought, wow, man, like that is so dangerous. Anybody that gets rooked into that is really stupid, but it shows how far the technology has come in a very short period of time, because it looks like Elon Musk standing there talking to you. And a lot of people will be fooled. They think that he's endorsing this financial product, but it's not him. And they also had one with Tucker Carlson and a news anchor from MSNBC. I saw 3 of them pop up in my feed today about this very subject. But the larger, more apparent threat that is also being focused on, again, by a lot of prominent economists, is the disruptive nature of artificial intelligence when it comes to displacing a wide range of workers, not just blue collar workers this time around, but white collar workers, even lawyers, and possibly doctors and journalists, and a wide range of other people, because of the nature of the technology. And it's also potentially disruptive on assembly lines. And, Richard Wolff, again, I mean, I would encourage people to go and watch Richard Wolff. I disagree with a lot of what he says on the economic front. I agree with some of it. Most of his economic philosophies, I disagree with. He's very left-wing. He's definitely socialist. He's been an advisor to, previous Democrat governments. His take on artificial intelligence is this. He says that as you see automation and technological advancement, and you've seen this throughout history, it's his assertion that when you have something like the assembly line come along, people like Henry Ford simply take the increase in profit that they get from the automation and the increase in productivity and keep it for themselves. The company, the corporation, the company owner, essentially, the oppressor, they keep all of the profits for themselves, and the workers suffer. But that isn't, in my estimation, true. He's missing a huge part of the equation, okay? Because he's saying that the solution, for instance, if you have huge productivity gains through artificial intelligence, rather than have the company lay off workers because they need fewer workers, okay, that his solution is, if a company has a bunch of workers and artificial intelligence makes things more productive and you don't need as many workers. He wants to see all the workers work fewer hours and then all those profits divided up, not just among the owners of the company and the shareholders, but among the workers, so that they all get
So
a piece
you're
of the
cutting
pie.
off the producer and the editor.
And then the profits then are shared among the workers and the company owner, and it's sort of like mutual ownership, collective ownership of the company. But I have a huge problem with that, and here's why. He's missing the point. And this is my argument, can be illustrated even through the assembly line of Henry Ford. He's missing the point of the advantages of automation and technological advancements. When Henry Ford automated the assembly of automobiles in a more perfected way, he didn't invent the assembly line, but he did improve upon it and scale it up. Society as a whole benefited from that because the cost of automobiles came way down to the point where the average person could afford to purchase one. It also resulted
Now we're
in higher
entering
wages.
in the realm of Fordism.
It also
right?
Raised wages for the people working on those assembly lines. And because they were able to mass produce the product, it created more and more and more jobs. So that's a perfect example of how technological advancement and innovation, innovation benefits all of society. You see, it isn't just about profits. That's not the only benefit that comes from that. It's about a higher standard of living for everyone, an improvement in the quality of life for everyone. A rising tide raises all boats. Not only that, but because it freed more people from the manual labor of assembling cars by hand, they were then free to pursue other kinds of activities that added to economic growth. They could go build a house or they could go do something else. And because there was all this additional wealth, true wealth, injected into the economy through the automated assembly line and the products that we got from that, there was more money, more actual wealth, which created more demand for a variety of products, whether it was the paint for the automobiles or the wheel bearings, or because there was now a guy selling hot dogs in front of the factory where they built the cars, or there was a restaurant down the street from the factory. So the guy who maybe lost his job, putting the screw in manually into a wheel, now he owned a restaurant down the street and was a restaurateur instead. A variety of different kinds of occupations that would come out of that. It's the same thing with artificial intelligence. Everybody sees up front the job losses, the jobs displaced because of the technology, but we can't really predict what might replace those jobs or how people will respond. But people throughout history always have. They have become industrious. They've become resourceful. They respond and adapt, and they find other things to do, and the economy can expand outward. The danger in the whole thing, in my estimation, is that because government is controlling this particular round of innovation and economic expansion, we're in danger because government is always slow to respond and often makes huge mistakes when they are trying to plan the economy centrally without letting the free market respond, without letting people respond in kind and letting them find solutions really in a truly collective way, which is to say that we all independently make our economic choices and send signals into the marketplace as individuals that then in the aggregate send pricing and supply signals to individual companies where they know that they need more plastic to make more pens because there's more demand in the marketplace for these pens. But if you have some Yahoo like Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland sitting in an office someplace just with I guess a chalkboard and a piece of chalk or a computer, and they're just making arbitrary decisions on how many pens that we're going to produce this coming year because they control everything, then yeah, you're going to end up with people who don't find new jobs. And when they're trying to control the economy entirely through fiscal policy and economic and monetary expansionary policy, like modern monetary theory, that doesn't add any productivity into the economy at all. And when they restrict people in certain economic activities through regulatory actions, people can't respond appropriately or efficiently. That is where the danger lies. It's too much central planning. If the government really wanted electric vehicles, if they really wanted this done efficiently and properly in a way that doesn't risk having the entire thing implode, if they want artificial intelligence to help us, they really, aside from regulations to prevent AI from destroying humanity, okay, aside from that, you want regulations for that. But largely, they need to, I think, get out of the way on the economic side and let people make their own decisions and embrace the concept of freedom, not just freedom on an overall, in an overarching way, but very specifically economic freedom for people. That's what I see. That's what I think. And that economic expansion through AI and these technological innovations, if government would get out of the way and stop giving all of our money to big corporations like Volkswagen, society as a whole would benefit in a far greater way. And then we wouldn't have the World Economic Forum and these globalists worried that we're going to have a bunch of useless leaders on our hands that they then have to find some way to deal with. And we all know how they want to deal with us, because we would all find new ways to become productive. But when they try to make you a slave by making you a slave of government through regulation and through universal basic income, and they make you dependent on the state, you do become useless. You do not become productive. You become dependent on the state. And that becomes a drag on the whole system. And instead of actually trying to help people, then they try to ration care, ration resources, and then they start to look at you as a burden. That is the danger, and we need to find some way out of that trap. That's my estimation on that. That's my take on it. And I'm listening, we've had people on the show here, communists even, who, I've allowed them to come on and share their views on this. I have this view. I'm sure that many other people would disagree with me, including Richard Wolff, who has many more letters behind his name than I do. But I think he is dead wrong once he gets to a certain point in this equation. He is just dead wrong.
No, but I like what you said, actually, and it makes sense. But in a way, I mean, I know that, with all the corruption that we see and everything that we can see with not only the corruption, but the government overreach or the collusion that he has with other people. I'm trying to make sense of all that. And, I mean, as I know that we having some shortages in some places with all that, this is where I was, striking myself, my head on the wall, trying to find myself if is there something in there that we're going through. And I mean, I think we still probably just scratching that surface. But yeah, I mean, it all makes sense, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, you've raised the subject of, late stage capitalism, and it is an absolute concern. I'm sure that because we are in the late stages of capitalism, which really is a reference to the end of our system, where many people believe that because of all this, built-in inflationary deficit spending, which has become an integral part of our economic system, that is not sustainable, that we are now in the end stages of it all, which is why the Western economy is on the verge of collapse. And I think that there is some real truth to that. And that is why you're seeing other countries like Russia and China and, all the BRICS nations, they are trying to sever ties or decouple from the US dollar. That once we get that happening, that's going to set off the domino effect. This is a big problem. But yeah, late stages capitalism, That's also why you're seeing, I think, the conflict in Ukraine. This is sort of a last attempt by the West to prop up their economies through military intervention by asserting their authority, their dominance globally. And because they're having trouble doing it economically, and they've always had trouble doing it just economically, it is the military largely that well, I think primarily that has propped up the Western capitalistic system, because it has been based on this public-private corporatocracy that has really, especially since I think the late 70s, taken hold and has taken us down this road to managed decline. Back to you, sir.
Right. Well, like you just said, we're seeing the decline of the American hegemony. So, and
yeah,
not only that, but the whole system that the American and probably NATO has tried to build on for so long. Actually, it's because of their imperialism.
And the government has not only allowed, but they've encouraged the capitalists, the big corporations, the shareholders, even, you know, a lot of people don't even realize this has gone on because they just kind of invest their money in blindly and have a financial advisor or whatever. But the system is set up so that what we saw was the hollowing out of productivity of the middle class in Canada, the United States, where these companies basically took the jobs, and this goes back to the 80s especially, where they shifted production. They shut down factories here and they'd shift production to other countries. First Mexico, and then, finally, ultimately now to China, where most everything is produced. And these companies then import the goods back into the country and sell it to people here at a higher price, where they produced it for less, where labor costs are less, regulations are reduced in these other countries. Their overall cost of production is much lower. Then they import back into Canada and the US, where their wage costs became higher over time because of unions and more government regulations and so on. But that's all coming to an end, because the only way to finance that has been with more and more and more and more deficit spending in order to put the purchasing power into the hands of the people here in order to actually purchase the goods that are produced in places like China. But now, instead of actually paying for the goods, in a macroeconomic sense, the governments here, they just print more money in order to pay off the debt to countries like China and others. So in reality, they're not getting as much money back, because as you print money, the money becomes worth less over time. It becomes inflationary. And then as they're paying off all these debts internationally, these other countries, they become enslaved as well. So what they've really attempted to do is enslave countries like China or Vietnam or Indonesia, or prior to that, even Japan to some degree, right? So now these other countries are figuring out they're never actually going to pay it back, and we can't pay back all the money because we're so far in debt, $32 trillion in debt in the United States, and they will never be able to pay it back. So when they keep borrowing, it's all going to really collapse when these other countries, where they keep sending us goods and accepting more and more debt, when they stop participating in that, and they're no longer willing to essentially lend us value by sending us the goods to accept money that really isn't worth anything, then everything's really going to collapse. Most people can't even begin to understand how that works, because they don't have even a rudimentary understanding of economics, because they just don't teach it in school.
That's true. There's so much to know into economic that is, it's mind-boggling to me. And yeah, it's one of those things that I'm not an expert into, but I interest myself into economic, but it's so large, and yeah, we never know where to start with that thing.
To me, it's infuriating, because we have these politicians who make all these promises like Justin Trudeau does, or Joe Biden, where he stands up there and, Biden again today, they were talking about student loan forgiveness, and they just keep promising more and more and more free stuff, and they don't really have the money, but they just keep on printing it. And it's just attacks on the poor and the middle class ultimately. And people who think they're getting free stuff, they're not. We are not getting free anything from government. Ultimately, at some point, we have to pay. We will, whether it's us or our grandchildren or our children or somebody's children sometime down the road, or somehow we will all pay. And if we don't start to pay in a real meaningful way, and I think we're probably already too far, there's probably no way for us to deal with this now effectively, properly, this is going to collapse. And we are all screwed. I think the powers that be know it. That's why you're seeing all of the actions that we're seeing, whether it's the wars or, quantitative easing, just the ongoing problems that we're seeing. And as you say, more efforts to control us, because they know that when all this collapses, they're going to have some really angry people, masses of people taking to the streets, protesting, and these governments at that point will be toast.
That's
No matter
true,
how
my
much
friend.
control they try to exert, the people en masse, if there's mass starvation, mass poverty, if people are losing everything, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Yeah, well, you try that, pal. I mean, that's for me. That for me, Dragon, is like, that makes me laugh. I'm not afraid of these guys. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. No, you know what? As soon as people are no longer owning anything, they're going to take to the streets. And you know who's not going to be very happy? People like Klaus Schwab. They're coming for him. Okay.
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure that where I'm standing right now, I will see a lot of people, if they're angry and doesn't have anything to put in their mouth for a month.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right in front of this building.
That is right.
But yeah,
I mean, we've seen certain groups of people throughout history targeted by dictatorial regimes, communists, fascists, dictators, whatever, various governments, where they've starved certain segments of the population for political reasons, and they've targeted certain people. But they were only able to do that because they were able to provide adequate shelter and food and economic incentives to other portions or other parts of the population, and then get their support from those people and have majority of support in order to target minorities, in order to keep those people in line, those people being their political opponents, or sometimes more or horrifically cultural or ethnic groups that they create an enemy from, right?
that's more a Stalinist kind of way.
Yes. Whether he's, starving people because, he's taking the food from the farmers in Ukraine or whatever they're doing, right? We've seen these things happen in the past. I'd like to avoid them in the future, but from everything I'm seeing, it's history rhyming. Not exactly repeating because the technology is different this time around, but it's history rhyming. And this time I think is going to be very, very, very disruptive. I don't know. People better, I hate to use the phrase because it's overused, but people really do need to wake up and see the collision course we're on. But people, they just want their free stuff, man. Every election. That's why people say, well, why did you keep voting for those guys? Because they offered people free stuff. Never underestimate the power of free. If they offer people free stuff, they will vote for it because they think it's free. They don't understand the economics behind it. It's a big fallacy, a facade.
Tell you, if I do something for you free, well, I might not ask you for any money, but one day I must ask you for some help. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
that's right. And that is the dirty secret behind all what the government does too. The more free stuff they give you, the more they control you, and the more they take your freedom away. They take away your choice. But the dirtiest part of it all is they're buying you with your own money, or the money that they're taking from the future, which is the money from your children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren. That's where the money's coming from. It's your money. They're just borrowing it and giving it back to you in order to buy
still,
your
I'm
vote.
born in 1980, And I mean, our generation always say that we've been in debt because of our grandparent. So,
well, that's my take on the whole thing. I don't know if I was able to explain myself clearly enough for people to understand my position, but I'm glad that you brought it up, because this is actually a subject, Dragon, that I've wanted to talk about for probably a couple of months now. So you gave
well,
me an
I'm glad
excuse
that
to
I brought
spout
that
off.
for you, my friend. Well, I will tell you that you know better economic than me.
The thing about economics, though, is it's largely about social policy. It's a social science. It's not a hard and fast, tried and true thing. Like, it's not. There are certain elements of economics that are undeniable because they are based on the laws of nature. You know, it's like gravity. If I drop this pen, you know, it's gonna fall because there's positive gravity. That's a law of nature. Well, it's the same thing with supply and demand. There's no escaping it. I mean, you can deny it for a while. I can hold it up, but eventually my hand is going to turn to dust because I'm going to die and decay, and that pen is going to drop. You can do a lot
What
of
goes
different
up must go
things,
down.
right? That's right. That's exactly right. And that's true with many things in economics. You can put an airplane in the air, but it can't stay up there forever. It's going to run out of fuel. Even a glider.
Exactly.
Right? It's all coming down at some point. It's just, you know, but
No more
people
lift
who
in
are
the air.
collectivists and central planners, Marxists, communists, economic fascists, authoritarians, these people, you know, it's a mindset. They think that everything can be controlled, that you can manipulate nature, that you can control nature. That, and yes, to some degree you can build a house to shelter yourself from the elements, right? There are things that you can do, but even that needs to be maintained. Nothing is static. It just isn't. I need to put a new roof on my house after a number of years. It deteriorates over a number of years. These are the laws of nature, and these things play out even in the economy. But these people who think they can control everything, collectivists generally, those systems by their very nature are coercive. They inevitably lead to authoritarian measures, because in order to sustain their systems, they need to tax people. They need to control people. They need to force people to do certain things and to comply with their plans, because they are centrally planning. And therefore, if you need people to comply, you need some sort of enforcement mechanism or some sort of incentive mechanism. And that inevitably leads to some sort of coercion. And there's always a penalty mechanism built into that. That's where authoritarianism comes from. That's why it's always inevitable, whether you're dealing with an economic fascist or a Marxist or a communist or even just a socialist. There's always that coercion that is built into the system. Even though they say that they're trying to do good things for people, at some point, someone's going to suffer, because they're going to stand up and be like me and say, you know, I don't really want to be, you know, a worm picker. I don't want to do that for a living. And they're going to say, no, you must be a worm picker, or whatever it is. Or I'm going to say, no, I don't want to go to that doctor. I want to go to another doctor, and I want a second opinion. And they say, no, we're paying for it. There's only one system. You must go to that hospital and see that doctor. And there's only one system, and you're not allowed to participate in any other way. There's no other option for you. You don't have the freedom to choose. Or whether it's a thing in the arm, because there's only one system. They've taken people's choices away. And you know why people were forced to get the thing in the arm? It's because everybody took the free stuff. And they let the government set the system up so that we didn't have a choice. And then everybody's standing around saying, well, where's my freedom? And the government is saying, well, you wanted all your free stuff. This is the price you pay. And if you want to get on a plane or a train or a ship or a bus, or if you want to cross the border, you want to do anything, you're going to do what we tell you to do, because you're responsible for the collective. The collective is not responsible for you. And the reality is, They've turned society upside down because we've let them, because we bought into the whole socialized healthcare, socialized everything. We get free stuff to the point where some people in the last election were advocating for air conditioning as a human right. So they want the government to pay for air conditioning. I mean, there were arguments being made for that in the last election. It didn't really get that far, but people were really advocating for it. Universal basic income. You take that money, how much freedom do you think the government is actually going to give you? If you take UBI, then you can be pretty much sure that you're going to have a social credit score, you're going to be digitized, and they're not going to give you that money unless you comply with what they want. So it's a gigantic trap. That is how you end up being tracked digitally and controlled by government, by accepting the socialists' handouts. That's where the coercion and the authoritarian comes in. The problem is people want their cake and they eat it too. But if you want freedom, you have to have some personal responsibility that comes with that. The truth of the matter is, in a truly free society, we always kind of have come down somewhere in the middle. We always have a hybrid economic system, a little bit of socialism, some market, free market. It's a mix of things to kind of keep everybody happy. We kind of hit a sweet spot, I think, for quite a while in Western society. And every country in the world, even if it's China or Russia or India or Pakistan or Vietnam or, Venezuela, everybody has a hybrid economic system. There's no pure market. There's no pure socialism. There's no pure, communist system. Even in Russia, I mean, they've got the oligarchy. It's really set up in a manner that's very similar to what we have here already. These economic systems are all very similar. You know where the true free market exists, in my estimation, Dragon? Internationally, between countries. There's no free market here, but out in the middle of the ocean, and as countries interact with each other, that's where the free market still reigns. Because as countries interact, you see these countries sitting down at the table at the G7, they're representing the collective efforts of their countries. And so on that level, as they negotiate agreements between countries like free trade agreements and so on, that's actually the free market in action. It's a little bit scary for people because there's, there's complicated legal mechanisms in place in order to enforce those agreements. And it really comes down to, if we have an agreement on grain between these two countries, then, we have to honor the agreement, but those agreements can fall apart at any point. But that's also what the globalist movement is about. They want to eliminate the free market element on the macro scale on a global level, right? They want to control it all so that everything falls under their umbrella and they control all the countries and they get to centrally plan, not just your local economy, but the global economy, all the countries. That's the elimination of the free market. That's honestly a large part of what's at stake in this struggle, this globalist struggle. It's a struggle between whether we're going to have any remnant left of a global free market where the sovereign nations are negotiating between themselves economic deals, or whether it's going to be economic deals that are dictated by a central planner saying all countries will adhere to this agreement, this United Nations agreement, all countries will sign on to this, and commerce between countries will be conducted in this manner. Or whether it's even healthcare policy, which is dictated ultimately by the World Health Organization. And that takes precedent and dominance over all the other sovereign nations, so that these countries are ultimately asked to give up not just their national sovereignty, but their economic sovereignty as well. And again, I don't know if people understand what I'm talking about here, but that is what is at stake as you have the World Economic Forum coming together, trying to create this collectivist economic system. It is ultimately going to destroy this international free market where countries are able to negotiate agreements from one country to another.
Yep.
All the countries will be in lockstep, basically sharing everything. They'll take the wealth from the West and shift a lot of it over to other countries where they deem it to be needed, and everybody will have the same. This is, whether you want, I call it sort of a communo-fascistic economic system. It combines communism, fascism. They kind of come together in this new hybrid collectivist economic model. That's what I see. And it's the end of free markets, period, globally around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's kind of wow. You just blew my mind, man. Well, I'll tell you that. I'm blown. Yeah, well, and yeah, I agree with all that. And I mean, if you look at it, isn't it weird how the WEF comes down to us with all those sanctions? I mean, with all what's going on with Ukraine and all that, I mean, NWO, we once says, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, long time ago. Now it's not the thing anymore, but still like almost, right?
New World Order.
Yep.
And that's what this war in Ukraine is largely about. It's like, who is going to control the world? You know, they, is the West. That's why the United States is honestly looking for regime change in Russia, because Putin is standing up to this NATO, World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, collectivist, globalist agenda, where they're trying to basically impose this, all their rules on all countries, right? A rules-based international order, where they're saying these laws will apply to all countries. And that just does away ultimately with individual agreements between various sovereign states. And Russia, China, these other countries, to some degree, because they're aligning, they're saying, no, we're going to run by our rules. And then the other side saying, no, it's going to be our rules. This isn't just a war about, territory in Ukraine. This is a war that's about a larger concept. And ultimately, who is going to control the economy and become the dominant economic force and dominant military force in the world heading into the rest of this century? That is really what is at stake.
Yep. And so all the free rights that we have since World War II that we've been fighting for all these years and decades actually are at stake.
Yes.
Which is the other scary thought.
Which is why we need, a government back in power here that is focused on nationalism, respecting our Constitution, respecting and properly interpreting and protecting the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Bill of Rights. Right now, we have a government in place that doesn't respect any of that because they don't believe in God, clearly. So it's a secular government. We have secular politicians.
Almost theocratic.
They don't care about God, and everything with them is a construct. It's a constructed economy. It's a managed, centrally planned economy. It's a construct for, even when it comes to gender now, you can be anything you want to be. And if you're not that thing that you think you are in your head, or that you've convinced yourself you are, we'll not only accept that you want to say that you're that thing, we'll give you the surgery to make you that thing. And we'll even finance it with government tax dollars, right? So they think they can construct anything and everything, and that they can even construct, or even life itself to these people has become a construct. It's not based in reality. They're creating a new digital reality where they're literally talking about chipping people and then maybe even transplanting your consciousness ultimately into an artificial intelligence environment to duplicate who you are, or to have you transplant you into a computer so that you become immortal. So this is really where they're going, and this is where this whole concept of transhumanism comes from, right? It's all about artificial versus natural, and it's I think it's I just wanted to make reference to like even the eighth fire and that native prophecy where right now this has come to the surface, right? This is what people are focused on. The eighth fire is supposed to be a choice for people to make between the natural way or the artificial, mechanized, technological way. And I would say that it's hard for people to even wrap their head around that concept. And the natural way doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, run into the woods and live in a lean-to and give up your house. I think really what a prophecy like that, and I'm not an expert in Native history or in Native theology, but to me, what this represents is a point in time where human beings, our societies, we're left with this choice. We can either embrace this new digital electric vehicle, trackable in reality, or accept, like, there's the industrial age that we have been part of. To me, industrialization has been largely organic. It's a tangible thing. You build something with steel. To me, fossil fuels, oil is a tangible, organic thing, right? From that, we've been getting our energy. It's God's gift to humanity, this bountiful energy source. What we're getting instead now is a sanitized, synthetic everything, whether it's an electric vehicle, which to me feels very digitized and synthetic, or even now these vaccines, which are no longer based on like an actual virus itself, where they take a portion of the virus and organically create a vaccine from it by using only a portion of the virus that isn't going to kill someone and injecting that into somebody. It's an organic vaccination method. Now we're getting this mRNA digital system where they're creating these new forms, these new kinds of vaccines. It's synthetic. That to me is another representation of the choice that we are being asked to make as a society. Do you want to continue down the organic road, or are we going to embrace this synthetic future where everything is a construct, everything is manufactured? And I'm not so sure that the synthetic method, when it comes to integration with organic beings like humans, when we're talking about anything even from vaccines to transhumanism at a larger scale, I'm not sure that it's going to work, that it's actually going to be that effective, because ultimately it is synthetic, and we're trying to mesh man with a new synthetic future, and we have a soul, and I think that they're just taking that out of the entire equation. It's they're treating people like Yuval Harari says, that humans are now hackable animals. I think he's missing a big part of the equation. We're not hackable instruments. We're not just a biological computer. There's much more to life than that. It's not just a genetic DNA sequence. It's not just bits and bytes biologically that he's trying to manipulate using synthetic means. There's much more to human beings than that. And life itself, for that matter. My dog is more complex than that. My dog has a darn soul. I can tell.
Back in '94, when I was in biology, I used to say that there are never going to be any engineer that's going to recreate a complex body like a human being. This is impossible. We're a piece of art.
Yeah.
But you know what's the scary part of transhumanism?
We're so complex that every retina is unique. Every fingerprint is as unique as a snowflake. I'm sorry, but you cannot recreate life or components of life in the same way that nature does synthetically, because that is how sophisticated nature is. Every single snowflake is unique. Every single human being is unique. That's where they also miss the mark when it comes to identity politics and this whole notion that diversity is our strength, which is really another way of saying we're going to divide you all up into groups and pit you against each other so that you're all fighting all the time. No, I don't judge people by the color of their skin or by their, their ancestry or anything else. I judge each individual on an individual basis because every single human being is absolutely 100% unique, and therein lies true diversity. And you can't prove me wrong because I can just point to a person's fingerprint and say, see?
Right.
Dragon, it is 8:57. I've been rambling for too long. I want to wrap up tonight by 9 p.m. to kind of keep this thing on track. So I'm going to throw it over to you for a quick wrap up, sir, before we sign off.
Well, only I will say thank you, sir, for the good words. I think it was enlightening a lot for a lot of people. And on the, well, thanks for the free speech that you give me. So I will say good night, everyone. Hope you enjoy. Have a good one.
Thank you, Dragon. It's been a pleasure as always. I'll try to let you talk more next time, and hopefully we get some more people on here as well with more video chats in the future.
All good.
I will be back tomorrow night, folks, at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow is Thursday, and I, just like tonight, when I came in here, I really didn't know what the heck I was going to be talking about for 3 hours, but somehow we got through it, and I will get through it tomorrow night as well, but I'll be better prepared, guaranteed, heading into the broadcast tomorrow evening here on the Maverick News Channel, where we have the antivirus programs for your mind. Catch everyone on the flip side. Love you. Catch you tomorrow.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.